Welcome back, creeps. Hopefully everybody can hear us. We're trying out some new microphones, as you can probably see, because the old microphones that I had died, and now I'm trying to, get these ones working properly. Anyway, welcome back to Weekly Creep, episode something.
But seriously, do you remember us?
Our brother-in-law the other day was like, "Hey, when was the last time you recorded? It's been like over a year, hasn't it?" It hasn't. It's been 2 months.
And then we were like, "Oh shit, we have a podcast." Yeah.
So the last
Gotta
episode,
get on that.
the last episode was, I bought this for the last episode, and it ended up being delayed. And then I think I bought another one, and now it's just a happy little Raggedy Ann doll.
A double-ended Raggedy Ann.
Yeah. So that was, I think, Halloween. Or
Yeah.
around Halloween time. And then I literally don't know what happened after that.
No, like we did that story, and then we did the scary stories for Halloween.
Oh,
That
is
was
that
right
what it was?
before
Oh,
Halloween.
okay.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
I was dressed like a prawn.
Right.
That was for Halloween.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh, well, Thanksgiving. And then it was like, oh, well, it's Christmas. And I asked people, some people did send in like listener stories and stuff. And then we were like, oh, perfect. Over Christmas, we'll sit down and record these.
Yeah.
Then you got sick.
Yeah.
Then I got sick. And then we've had like a bunch of work stuff.
Like, getting sick sucks. I forgot how bad it sucks.
I think this is the first time it ever like actually like took us out of.
Well, I think it was because it wasn't just a cold, it was a flu. I think that's what we had.
Yeah, but like it literally messed up. I feel like everything. Like I feel like it was 2 weeks ago. It only lasted a few days.
For me, it was a week.
Yeah.
I was out for a week, yeah.
Anyway, so that was Christmas for us.
I know you got sick on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, I was pretty sick on Christmas Eve, but I was like that nice part of being sick where I was just like cold and cozy and like, oh, I'm gonna get sick, but it's like not quite here yet. So I actually enjoyed it quite a lot. I just sat on the couch watching movies. Yeah, I watched like The Hobbit, all of the Hobbit movies.
Yeah, you fucking did.
That was immense. I don't know why people don't like it. I actually think I prefer The Hobbit to The Lord of the Rings.
He was looking at me saying, you're the size of a hobbit.
It's the hair as well. But as well, I've started for the first few days after I was sick and I like went back to work and stuff. I was starting to, first of all, I look like Gimli from Lord of the Rings. I'm like the same height as him. The hair and all looks the same. And then there's like people at work who are like 6.5 foot tall. And they're like, oh, this must be like what looking at elves or humans is like for
an elf.
For hobbits and stuff.
Yeah.
So that was me. Obviously then busy doing like Houston Strange stuff and stuff. So thank you very much to everybody who's watching that. There's surprisingly, like that has its own audience.
Yeah.
Like not Weekly Creep followers. So if you're a Weekly Creep follower and you haven't checked it out, please jump over. I do think you'll like it.
It's not as casual.
It's a bit more intense, yeah. That last one was pretty scary, I think.
So go watch that and then decompress with us here.
That's it. But yeah, other than that, like it's just been a whole pile of nothing, I feel like.
What do you mean?
Like it was Thanksgiving and then it was Christmas, but everything in between was kind of just like
it was a fucking blur.
Yeah,
and that's just the way the holidays are. I feel like, but I mean, for me, I felt like I was really enjoying it. Because, I mean, there is always something in the air when October hits, and it doesn't go away until January hits. Yeah. And then you have to make your own magic, which I have.
Yeah,
with my Valentine's Day tree.
Yes. But as well, it's finally like gotten cold and stuff here now.
Oh, yeah. So. And we're supposedly expecting either a buttload of ice or snow.
I'm just hoping for a couple of days off work, to be honest, where I can just enjoy being cold.
And like, we're just talking amongst each other, like, not, like at work, being like, sounds like call out weather, doesn't it?
I mean, I do not need an excuse. But
And like someone even said like, and this was a manager, she was like, um, I hope they're buckling up, anticipating a lot of call outs because that's what's gonna happen.
I think they are. There was like emergency meetings and stuff last week.
Mm.
Anyway,
Yeah, I mean because like Houston's just not built. The Houston roads are not built for that. It's
no.
makes them that kind of weather makes them totally unsafe, and just like other equally important things, it's just not a priority.
Yeah, and other fun stuff that happened in the last few weeks. I almost got arrested. That was funny.
Oh yeah.
And then I had a blowout on the highway a couple of weeks after
Yes.
that. And
Yeah.
then
That sounds like a pile of nothing.
yeah. Changing my tire, like with all these trucks like blowing past. I texted my friend afterwards. I was like, I just had the most like shaky knee tire change ever. But I was very impressed with the speed at which I changed that tire.
Yeah, like I was expecting you to be gone for so much longer, and you were like only 5 minutes late to work. He called me ahead of time.
Yeah.
He was like, "Can you tell him I'm gonna be late for work?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And then like 10 minutes in, he's just breezing on in. Like I was just like kept walking outside to see if I could catch him, walking in, and he's just having like a grand old time talking to somebody else. And I'm like, cool, I guess he's fine.
Just chatting with one of the lads, was telling them what
Yeah.
just fucking happened. And then yeah, yesterday you saw a ghost.
Oh yeah, that was fucking weird. But like, and then I started talking to my nail lady and we are just saying like,
Well, tell the whole story.
so I walked in, so my nail lady is in like one of those buildings where it's like independent businesses, small businesses, they can rent out these little cubicles. And I went on a Monday and it was pretty dead. Usually if you go like on a weekend, there's like people bustling, like the people
Yeah.
getting their hair done, nails done, all sorts of stuff. But it was pretty dead that day. It was pretty dead that day. And so I had to run to the bathroom and I went in there and I just saw a pair of like, they look like Uggs, like on the first stall. There's only 3 stalls in there. And I was like, shit, man, I gotta pee. So I go to the last stall and I do my business. And I come back out and I wash my hands and I'm standing there drying my hands with paper towels and I'm just looking to the floor. And I noticed that all the doors are ajar and there's no more feet, but nobody left, you know? And then as I was like processing this, like, hey, the doors are all ajar, there's no feet. And as soon as I processed that, I hear a lady just go, huh. And I was like, cool, I'm gonna go back to my appointment. But yeah, that was fucking weird. Of all the things, the paranormal stuff to happen, it would happen in a bathroom for me.
So, and interestingly enough, I was having a conversation on Saturday with someone about a particularly famous haunted bathroom in Galveston, right? The Galvez. I'm pretty sure we've spoken about it on here before, but like one of the bathrooms in the Galvez is haunted by a dude, like apparently. And some people have found him creepy and some people have just found him like out of place kind of thing. But
Yeah.
anyway, I remember seeing, I think it was Amanda Paulson. Check her out on TikTok if TikTok is still a thing by the time you're watching this. But she was like, why do ghosts hang out in like closets and attics and stuff like that? But if they are just like black and white, like this is somebody who passed on and is now still in this place, they're just keeping out of the way. You know what I mean? So maybe that was kind of my theory then with the bathroom. Was it maybe?
And I don't know if we had the conversation, but I've heard, people mention, like, when people see ghosts and apparitions, how come they're always wearing like old-timey dress? And I'm like, well, I just fucking saw one that was wearing Uggs. So
I mean, that's kind of a meme at this point, like, you know what I mean? But yeah.
There you go.
Pretty cool. Feet beneath the door. Another tie over crossover.
Yeah.
And I had a similar experience. Probably the only spooky experience I had like growing up. I think I was like in my early 20s, and where I was staying, the bedroom had like a little ensuite. And behind the ensuite, it wasn't a very well insulated place. Like it was really like a lot of like condensation and stuff in, and it would be like really cold in the wintertime. But behind the bathroom, it was just all bushes and stuff. Like you could get down there, but like you really had to like squeeze down there, like make it move a load of stuff. So it's not like people were just hanging out behind there. You know what I mean? I was like middle of the night. I was reading Game of Thrones, and I was getting ready to go to sleep or whatever, like just about to wrap up reading. And from the bathroom, directly behind the headboard of my bed, I just heard, and that was it. And it was one of those like weird, like I had no explanation. I definitely heard it, but I just like rolled over and went to sleep.
Mm.
So that's now, like looking back, that makes me even more convinced that it was just a weird paranormal thing. And I did know of a person who had lived there and died,
Mm.
you know, quite young. So I'm assuming it was just him, like just again hanging out in the bathroom. I don't know. Weird. Anyway,
Cool.
I don't have a story for you guys today, so
It's me.
it's on me. Oh wait, we need a tarot card first.
Oh yeah, where's my phone? All right, so tarot card of the day is the Chariot reverse. Today's message: you can accomplish a great deal today, but discipline is key. Stay focused on your goals. Don't let distractions interfere. It may be helpful to remember why you're pursuing your goals, especially the reasons that are emotionally compelling for you. Your project may be hard, but it is meaningful to you. The work you put in now will be worth it. Also, if you have any car things that you're procrastinating on, like you need to get your oil changed, you know, you might need some new tires, or a registration sticker has expired and you need to renew it.
Not me. My registration is brand new.
This is usually the card that's telling you, go take care of that. Anything that has to do with travel, or like, you know, if you're going to take a trip, just be extra careful with the details.
That's actually really interesting because I was just not whinging, but just saying I had a day off work today and I spent probably 5 hours at my laptop getting stuff done and getting nothing done. That's one of the reasons why we're using these mics, because my laptop is currently like moving a load of crap over. So I was like, all this work and it's not nothing, like I'm not progressing in any way. But the other things that I've been doing have been trip related and journey related.
That's good.
So it's very appropriate, I find.
All right. Well, let me roll up my sleeves.
It's actually quite warm in here, isn't it?
Not terribly warm. My toes are cold. All right, y'all. Check this shit out. So today we're going to be discussing third man factor.
Wow. I feel like, have you heard those AI podcasters?
I don't know. I haven't heard any of that.
So it was like a whole video about like, you know, how AI can literally create a podcast about whatever.
Oh.
And like you can hear, I had to use AI software to fix one of my audio files for Houston Strange. Hated using it, but I had no choice. And it's so fucking weird because it sounds human, and if you didn't know, if you weren't watching out for like these things, you would never know.
Yeah.
But like there's just like these weird subtleties, and I feel like the way I just said, wow.
Oh, it sounds like AI.
Yeah, it's like this is how I should respond to this. But I actually am. I'm very excited about this.
Me too. All right, so in order to discuss the third man factor, we have to discuss Ernest Shackleton. So who was he? Well, he was born in February 15, 1874. He wasn't born in, he was born on. And he was from Kildare, Ireland.
Ah.
Yeah. You know, because Adam's Irish, so he's excited. He was college educated from Dulwich College.
I don't know. Yeah, I've never heard of it.
And afterwards, he joined the Mercantile Marine Service in 1890 and became a sub-lieutenant in the Royal Naval Reserve in 1901.
Oh.
He's important because he went on this expedition that inspired some literature that ended up naming this phenomenon that happens,
Okay.
which I'll get into later. But I was doing some reading on this expedition. This expedition was to reach the South Pole, and it was with a crew of 28 men. And as I was reading the extent of it, it was just so harrowing. Like the things that these people went through. The expedition was called the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition. They basically traveled on a wooden boat called the Endurance, and they set sail on December 5th, 1914, and it departed from South Georgia,
South Georgia.
close to Antarctica.
Wow, okay. So South Georgia is an island. So it's not the country or the state.
And this here is Antarctica.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
The Sandwich Islands.
Yeah. So they eventually reached pack ice, which is a barrier of thick sea ice that surrounds the Antarctic continent. And on a wooden ship, all you can really do is to try to maneuver your way very carefully around it. And that's what they did until the ship literally got stuck. You're at the mercy of this floating ice.
Yeah.
They couldn't move forward. They couldn't move backward. The ice was actually beginning to push the boat away towards where they came from, towards the ocean. Ultimately, the decision was made to disembark the ship because the ship was starting to show signs of instability. Taking what provisions they could carry, including some smaller boats, they went ahead and did that. Slowly, the Endurance started to sink.
Wow.
Before they did, Shackleton was like getting nervous because he could hear the noises
Of the wood.
of the pressure of the water.
Jesus
The
Christ.
wood was just
Yeah.
moving and contracting and yeah. So he was like, all right, we gotta get the fuck out of here. So that's what they did. Anyways, so they disembarked the ship, they took all the stuff, and they had the smaller boats, and they sort of just camped for a while, to collect themselves, be like, okay, what do we do now? And as they were doing that, it was just slowly sinking in front of their eyes. It was fucking
Jesus
scary.
Christ. Yeah. Can you imagine sitting there around a fire, if they even had wood for a fire, just slowly watching their only possibility of escape?
Yeah. So now they're in the middle of nowhere on basically floating ice.
Yeah.
So for the next 5 months, the crew traveled along the cracked ice and dragged the little boats with them. On April 9th, with the ice cracking beneath their feet, they decided to board the boats. And they were out in the ocean for 3 days in constant rain and snow until they landed on what's called Elephant Island.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put in some visuals of these places on the map, just as we all know.
After 9 days, 6 of the crew, Shackleton included, got on one of these small boats to try to reach a whaling station back in South Georgia, which was over 800 miles away from where they were.
Wow.
They had no choice. They were like, no one knows we're here. They all think we're fucking on our way to Antarctica.
Yeah.
No help's gonna come because
those lads, they're all grand. They're in South Antarctica.
Yeah.
Or they're in the Antarctic.
So they had to go for help. For 16 days, they fought with strong winds that brought massive waves and buckets of heavy snow and rain. There was no relief from being dehydrated, drenched in freezing water, and some of the men were showing signs of superficial frostbite.
Jesus.
Their boat was in constant threat of capsizing because the amount of snow and ice that would accumulate on the boat. So they were constantly having to shuck it out.
Yeah, yeah.
But imagine 2 weeks where you're wet and cold all the fucking time. And these enormous fucking waves that are coming at you.
See, that would be that. It's legitimately one of my biggest fears.
It's like those paintings that you see, or those movies that you see where you're just okay, nothing good can come of
No.
this, you know? Right before they landed, a hurricane came and almost just like pushed them into these rocks, which was close to where they needed to land. For 9 more hours, they fought to stay out of the way of the rocks and then eventually landed. So they finally disembarked, and to their delight, were met with running rivers of fresh water,
Oh, wow.
where they drank to their heart's content. Unfortunately, where they landed was on the opposite side of where the whaling station was.
Right.
So Shackleton and 2 men, Worsley and Crean, had to trek mountains surrounded by ice and glaciers for 36 more hours with just a bit of rope and a carpenter's adze, which is like an ice pick, with a long handle,
Cool.
until they reached the station, the whaling station in Stromness. What's crazy though is as they were scaling those mountains, they were mostly traveling in the dark and in heavy fog. So there was one time where they ascended the mountains, in fog, and they descended in fog. But there was a lot of times where they were descending these mountains not knowing how steep these mountains were
Jesus.
because the fog was so thick and it was in the dark. There was at some points where they would just jump and hope that they wouldn't die.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So in one particular instance, they did just that, and they ended up falling 902 feet approximately, and the fall didn't kill them. They just dusted themselves off, shook hands, because I guess hugging other men wasn't cool at the time, and they just kept on keeping on.
Wow.
Eventually, they reached the whaling station, and rescuers were dispatched. The chaos didn't stop there. It took 3 tries for Shackleton to get his men on the Elephant Islands because the first ship ran out of fuel too quickly. The second got physically pushed back by the ice like the Endurance did. Finally, the third ship was successful, but by that time the crew on the island had been stranded for 128 days, but all survived.
Wow.
Fun fact, I was just like, as I was researching this, an article came up and it said that the Endurance was only located this year at the bottom of the Weddell Sea, where it is stuck in the seabed 10,000 feet underwater.
Jesus. I wonder, was it,
They were able to go down and take pictures and shit.
I wonder, like, did they only find it because, like, the ice has receded now because of global warming and stuff?
Maybe, I don't know. Shackleton's book called South about his expedition gained notoriety when he wrote the following about his trek to the whaling station with his 3 men. Quote, I know that during that long and racking march of 36 hours over the unnamed mountains and glaciers of South Georgia, it seemed to me often that we were 4, not 3. I said nothing to my companions during the crossing, but afterwards, Worsley said to me, Boss, I had a curious feeling on the march that there was another person with me. Crean confessed to the same idea. Worsley's own account included mention of a 4th person. Quote, while writing this 7 years after, almost, each step of the journey comes back clearly, and even now I again find myself counting our party, Shackleton, Crean, and I, and who was the other? Of course, there were only 3, but it's strange that in mentally reviewing the crossing, we should always think of a 4th and then correct ourselves. 3 or 4 weeks after arriving at Stromness, Sir Ernest and I, comparing notes, found that we each had a strange feeling that there had been a 4th in our party, and Crean afterwards confessed to the same feeling. So a lot of people didn't believe him at the time because his original publication made no mention of the 4th man, but in his original manuscript, there was mention.
Oh.
People thought he was jumping on the spiritual train and was trying to allude that this might have been an angel or something like that. But, that wasn't it.
This is 1900, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think
Around
so.
there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. Yeah. So why is it not called the 4th man? The moniker comes from one of T.S. Eliot's collection of poems called The Wastelands that was inspired by Shackleton's account of this ghostly presence that reads, who is the 3rd who walks always beside you? When I count, there are only you and I together. But when I look ahead up the white road, there is always another one walking beside you. So, to break it down, the third man factor is a phenomenon that happens when people are in highly stressful and dangerous situations and they feel, see, or hear a person who usually guides them out of these situations. Scientists believe these presences are aspects of ourselves that are given external form, and some spiritually inclined people, believe these presences to be angels. So, one of my sources is The Third Man Factor by John Geiger. I think that's how you pronounce his name.
Geiger, I think.
Geiger.
Yeah.
I pulled some stories from his book just to show like examples of how wild these situations can get when the third man shows up. So in late winter, James Savigny, a university student, and his friend Richard Whitmire went to climb Delta Form, which is a mountain in the Canadian Rockies in Alberta. Whitmire and Savigny were tied together and ascended the mountain using ice screws. Whitmire cut some ice loose and yelled down to Savigny to warn him right before an avalanche of snow followed. Like he felt and heard.
Yeah.
You know. So the avalanche swept the two men 1,968 feet towards the bottom of the mountain. Savigny lost consciousness, and Whitmire unfortunately did not survive the fall. Savigny woke up, but was not unscathed. His back was broken in 2 places. One of his arms was fractured. He had a broken scapula, severed nerves in his other arm that hung limp to his side, torn ligaments in both knees, cracked ribs, internal bleeding, a broken nose, broken teeth, and open wounds on his face.
Jesus.
So he was chewed up and spit out.
Yeah. It's grand. Walked away.
So he just walked it off, right?
Get up there.
Crazy enough, Savigny thought he was in Nepal, where he was 6 months earlier. So he was really out of sorts when he first came to.
Yeah. But clearly, like an experienced climber.
Yeah.
Who's back from Nepal. Like, Wow.
Once he finally remembered where he actually was, he looked over to his friend and lay next to him, certain that he too would pass. Savigny was resigned to his fate and began to succumb to it until he felt a presence that he couldn't see. He said that mentally his presence communicated to him, like mind to mind. Quote, "You can't give up. You have to try."
Wow.
Quote, this is from Savigny himself. "It told me what to do. The only decision I had made at that point in time was to lay down next to Rick and to fall asleep and to accept death. That's the only decision I made. All decisions made subsequent to that were made by the presence. I was merely taking instruction. I understood what it wanted me to do. It wanted me to live." End quote.
Wow.
The presence, which Savigny described as an empathetic woman presence, guided him back to the camp he and his friend had set up earlier that day. Due to the injuries, Savigny could not lift his legs up enough to walk, so he crawled a full mile to this camp.
Jesus.
Where he sat and again believed that he was going to die until he heard voices. So he screamed for help, but heard no response, and soon after felt the presence that had been guiding him until that point vanish. Quote, "What I thought then was, I'm hallucinating. The presence knows I'm dead, and it's just given up on me. But as it turns out, those were people, and they did come up. One of them skied out, and they flew me out that night in a helicopter. In fact, the presence had left because it knew I was safe." End quote.
That's interesting. He thought he was hallucinating the presence, but he actually thought he was hallucinating the voices.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I mean, as like a ghost person, I would be like, oh, it must have been, like that's his granny or something, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like they're calling me home, Elizabeth. Yeah.
What?
It's a reference to Sanford and Son.
Oh, right.
Where he'd be like, I'm coming, Elizabeth. Anyways, whatever.
Okay.
Alan Derbyshire was one of 3 who were still out skiing that afternoon. There were no other people in the area, and had Savigny not been rescued that day, he wouldn't have survived the night.
Wow.
Yeah. In Geiger's book, Savigny's story falls under what Geiger believes to be called the widow effect. It's one of the triggers that can bring upon the third man. He believes that boredom/monotony can also trigger the third man. Well, but let me touch on the widow effect. Basically, like if someone close to you, like a spouse or a really good friend, dies within your vicinity, that can trigger the third man.
So like almost like a coping mechanism.
Yeah. And like even after, like it's even if it's not in that moment, even after, like you can, like, you know, like there's a lot of surviving spouses that feel like they hear or feel the presence of their spouse that had passed away. That's the widow effect in that instance.
Yeah.
But it can,
It can also be a third man thing.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So back to boredom. He also believes that boredom/monotony can trigger the third man, but not in the circumstances that you would think. Charles Lindbergh took off on a monolith. I had to look up what a monolith was. A monolith airplane.
Let's look it up.
It's like one of those old-timey planes. Yeah, like those.
Oh, this one here?
Yeah.
Oh, well. I'm putting on my glasses because I'm officially an old man and I need to wear glasses now. So
yeah, so it's like those little old-timey planes.
Cool. Like a Cessna. Like
okay.
Yeah.
Don't know much about planes. So Charles Lindbergh took off on this monolith plane on May 20th, 1927 for a non-stop flight from New York to Paris because why not? After 17 hours of no sleep, he would doze off while flying his plane.
Safe, yeah.
Which was called the Spirit of St. Louis. But when he dozed off, the plane itself, like I don't know if he knew this beforehand, but when he would doze off, he would like veer off course. So the plane was structurally unstable. So when it would veer off course, as a result, waking him, like it would wake him up.
This was his
safety thing. Yeah.
Oh, I'm upside down now.
Yeah, it would shake him awake, basically.
Okay. Like lane assist, like.
I guess. So the man flew through fog, heavy rainwater, hunger, thirst, until he felt like he was detaching from his body.
Jesus Christ.
After 22 hours, he felt that he had company in the main body of his plane behind him. Quote, the fuselage behind me becomes filled with ghostly presences, vaguely outlined forms, transparent, moving, riding, weightless with me in the plane. I felt no surprise at their coming. There's no suddenness to their appearance. Without turning my head, I see them as clearly as though in my normal field of vision. End quote. He remembers that they would chat him up in a friendly way, advising him on his flight, being like, oh, good job on that, I don't know, left turn.
Yeah.
Discussing problems regarding his navigation, but mostly reassuring him. His flight was successful, and after 36 hours, landed at Le Bourget Aerodrome.
Wow.
Yeah. After his first published book about his flight, he wrote an unpublished memoir in 1939, this very personal experience. 30 years later, he began to be more vocal about his ghostly crew. So much like Shackleton, where like...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because in fairness, like, especially back then, like, you can't say shit like that. And
yeah, people think we're crazy.
Yeah.
So Lindbergh wrote, I've never believed in apparitions, but how can I explain the forms I carried with me through so many hours of this day? Transparent forms in human outline, voices that spoke with authority and clearness that told me, but what did they tell me? I can't remember a single word they said. End quote. Although he doesn't remember the conversations, he never wavered that they were there with him and that they were friendly and uplifted him during his flight. No pun intended.
That's terrifying. Like, first of all, how would, I don't know, like that whole situation, like 36 hours of a flight
Yeah, like this is what I mean. Like
on your own.
people be out here doing some wild shit.
Yeah. And then be like, no, it's fine. I have the ghosts.
Yeah, it's fine.
And yeah, that's the same Lindbergh I was
The Limber
just
baby?
confirming. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know actually what the Lindbergh baby story really is. But as Dulce has been telling the story, I've been looking up like little visual references here. So I will throw that in the video, like just a little like screenshots and stuff like that plane that he was driving. Did you see it?
Yeah. So Geiger mentions that people who experience the third man factor have what he calls the muse factor. Basically, if a person is more receptive to new ideas, prone to optimism, willingness to explore and anything else that falls under that kind of vibe of existing, really, they're prone to that. Another key is what is called absorption, which is a measure of how immersed into an event a person can be. Basically, how present are you?
Right.
People who are exposed to situations of extreme isolation can actually increase their ability to be more present, who may have been more closed off before. It sounds like a muscle that you can exercise, which makes sense to me because essentially you can do that with meditation. The combination of being more open and having high absorption gives someone what Geiger calls the muse factor. So you got to have the muse factor to have that third man presence
Muse
experience.
Muse, like the band, like
Yeah.
Muse. Okay.
I touched on optimism before, and that ties into what Geiger calls the savior. So this is like the other phenomena that people experience when they're experiencing the third man factor. They describe it as being a savior.
Right.
He believes that some people have an innate faith in their survival, and they manifest an outside presence that assists them in keeping their focus so that they can come out on the other side.
Wow.
I know. Whether you believe the accounts, Geiger's theories, or the survivor stories about unknown presences or not is up to you, obviously, but I would still recommend Geiger's book because it has loads of stories. And he also has a website where you can submit your own third man story. It's www.thirdmanfactor.com. And while you're at it, CC us as well, and we can share your story
Yeah, that
here.
actually would be really cool. Yeah.
So a couple of my other sources, healthline.com, psychologs.com, thirdmanfactor.iglooCommunities.com, britannica.com, stephenlytle.co.uk, and The Third Man Factor by John Geiger.
That's really cool. So like, say the savior one. Well, I guess the widow one as well, in my head could be the same thing, right? But it's like this, the savior one is you're so optimistic that you're gonna get out that you like personify it, right? And you give it this like third man who is like there, you're like, come on, like we can get through, blah blah blah. But the other side of that is like you're so pessimistic that you could personify it by it's someone who's saying, if you don't listen to me now, like or this is what you need to do to survive. And that's kind of like where the widow energy was.
There's
like it's the same thing, but like just different.
So he describes that it's like kind of the same, the two sides of the same coin, where it's like the savior, he describes the savior and he describes the destroyer. But like I was reading some of the stories, and a lot of the stories, the situations, you when you say they project or they do these things, it's almost like you're insinuating that they're doing it on purpose or something. But in one particular story under the umbrella of savior, it was this guy who was on a ship on his own, and he was like covered in blisters. The ship was not stable. Like it kind of just gave off the feeling that he did not plan this well. And he showed up, like he walked into his kitchen and he just heard someone say, "Hey, where are the eggs?" And he just starts laughing like, haha, there are no eggs. You know there's no eggs. But like later on, coming out of that experience, he's like, who the fuck was I talking to, basically? Like,
Yeah.
you know, so even though it's under the umbrella of savior,
It wasn't helpful necessarily.
it's not like it's not like what you think savior. It's not like, oh, God's talking to me.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's not so much that. It's not that kind of savior, but yeah, so it's in the same vein. But like I said, like I highly recommend the book. because he does get into his own theories about why it happens, but into the like, I guess the subs of this huge umbrella, which I mean they're all third man factor experiences.
No, that's really cool. And then this guy, Ernest Shackleton.
Yeah.
Shackleton.
So like, okay, so this guy, like I deleted a huge chunk of my presentation because I went down a loophole, not a loophole,
Rabbit hole.
a rabbit hole about Ernest Shackleton. So at that time, everybody was trying to get to Antarctica, and the person he ended up there was another person that he linked up with. I think his name was Smith. Basically, everybody was trying to form expeditions to get to Antarctica first.
Right.
So they finally did. The Smith guy finally made it, and he was like, "Oh, cool, we're finally here." Basically, you know, like awesome, we made it. And come to find out, there was a Norwegian man that beat them to Antarctica a month before.
Those bloody Norwegian. But so I had actually looked into the Shackleton thing, like very briefly. I didn't know all these details. But I was thinking, oh, that could be cool because I really enjoyed doing like the survival series that we did, like the boys on the island, the lads up in the mountains. But Tom Crean, there was a bar in County Kerry in Ireland called the South Pole. And I thought it might have been Shackleton's bar, but it's actually Tom Crean, his buddy. So he opened this bar in Kerry and it's called the South Pole. But apparently, like, he was very tight-lipped about it. And like people never really questioned it. It was like, oh yeah, there's the South Pole, like let's go in and have a drink or whatever. But like this man like just lived out his days as a publican, very relaxed, very calm. And then like people would be like, did you go to the South Pole? And he was like, nearly. You know what I mean? He would like tell this harrowing story. Like,
yeah,
wow.
Shackleton did he tried to do another expedition to get to Antarctica, but in that second expedition, like he was already like older and
Right.
And on his way there, he ended up passing away.
Oh.
Yeah. He died in his sleep, which is the best way any of us can hope to go.
Yeah, especially on an expedition like that.
Yeah. At 47, I think he passed away.
Well, that was old back in the day. Well done.
Thank you.
I thoroughly enjoyed that. I always picture us doing more outdoorsy stuff. The older we get, maybe depending on where we end up living, we just don't really have the option for it, like in our immediate vicinity. So maybe one day we'll have our own third man experience.
Let's hope not.
Up in the mountains of Scotland.
Because we got to be stressed the fuck out for that to happen. And I don't want to do that. No. I don't want to be that.
Well, right on. Well, yeah, very cool. So that was the third man factor. Thank you everybody for listening. Hope you enjoyed. And we'll see you eventually. Oh, actually, I was going to say a bunch of our like listener emails ended up in spam.
What?
And spam gets deleted every 30 days. So if we haven't like replied to you or anything,
fuck off.
And if you sent us stuff, yeah, because one of our good friends sent us something after we'd been talking on Instagram, and only that she had said, oh yeah, I'll send it this weekend or something. And then I checked our spam and it was there. But it was like already 3 weeks out and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Sorry, y'all.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Oh, actually. Fuck it.
Forgot you were here.
Oh, hey there. Yeah.
I didn't see you there.